Hello, good evening, and welcome to another episode of EAO's Just Ask, your monthly live appointment with a leading expert in implant dentistry. My name is Gerrit Heijkoop, and I'm the host of this EAO channel, and in this live video session, we're going to try to answer all your questions on what the real advantages are of using digital technologies in implant prosthodontics. And to help me do so, tonight I'm joined live from Zurich in Switzerland by Sven Mühlemann. Sven, good evening.
Good evening, Gerrit.
I'm so glad you're joining us tonight on this very interesting and important topic. Now, you are this month's leading expert because you're a specialist in reconstructive dentistry. Your job role at the moment is you're an assistant professor at the Clinic of Fixed and Removable Prosthodontics and Dental Material Science at the University of Zurich. And you published many publications already, and some specifically where you analyze the advantages of digital technologies, specifically in the field of prosthodontics. So that's why you are the best expert to be with us tonight. So welcome.
Thank you, Gerrit.
Just before we start, two fun facts I found about you when I Googled you. You're not only currently the president of the Swiss Society of Implantology and a board member of the junior committee of the EAO, European Association for Osseointegration, where we are a guest tonight. But I also found you won the European Prize for Clinical Research in Prosthetics last year. And this year, you were awarded Teacher of the Hour for your excellence in teaching at your own university during the pandemic. So congratulations on that, and glad you're joining us.
Thank you, Gerrit. It was Teacher of the Hour was a year ago now.
Yeah, at the start of the pandemic probably.
Yeah, and the last prize that was during the Congress in Lisbon. Yeah.
Yes, the EAO Congress, and well, that's a nice little bridge, and then we really get started, folks. But it's just been announced that this year we will have a second edition of the EAO Digital Days, the online version of the EAO Congress. And please save the date. First date you want to save is August 1st, because that's the deadline for abstract submission. So if you want your science to be part of that Congress, make sure you submit it before August 1st. And then the EAO Digital Days platform will open on October the 8th. It will be open for a full month, but on October 12th to 14th, we have these exciting interactive live shows again, where I hope you will be part of. And when I say you, like always, Sven, I've posted in the chat, let us know who you are and where you're joining us from. And again, we have a very international crowd with us. Your friend Thomas is joining us from Zurich as well, but we have Henk Pretorius joining us from South Africa, Victor Pallery from Moldova, Philippe from Paris, Mustafa Hussain from Iraq, some regular faces in these EAO Just Asks. Per Otterstad is joining us from Norway, Jacco Noot joining from the Netherlands. Goedenavond, Jacco. We have Lucretia Holtzman, looking forward. Go Sven. Mehmet Seva Yildiz from Turkey. Alfonso Gil is also joining from Zurich and wishing you a lot of luck. So let's get started, Sven. We have a big ambition. We want to shine some light on the potential of digital technologies and make sure that everybody understands where the real value is and where perhaps some limitations are. And when you and I chatted about that last week, you said, let's first get clear what we talk about, right?
Yeah.
Why is that so important? Is there a lot of misunderstanding there?
No, just people don't know really what happens in the dental lab, and I think that's very important in order to understand where possible advantages are or where possible limitations could be. So that's, I think, what we also need to know, what happens in the dental lab.
Exactly. Clear. Well, you've prepared a very nice slide to talk us through that. While you pull that up, let me remind our audience, this is live. The fact you are here from Colombia, I even see from Ljubljana. So welcome, everyone. Make sure you submit your questions in that YouTube live chat, because if you don't ask, you never know. And I will relay your questions on your behalf to Sven. And he's really eager. He said, I hope I get a lot of questions. So let's see if that works. But first, back to basics. Sven, what do we need to understand?
So first, I would like to give a short introduction into the topic. And before we talk about the digital workflow, I would like to wrap up the conventional workflow. And everyone, I think, should know what happens during a conventional workflow for the fabrication of an implant crown. It starts with a conventional impression. after that, the dental technician fabricates a model. He puts these two models into an articulator. Then the diagnostic part starts, but basically this is just like copying what was done already before. So we don't do diagnostics after the final impression. So diagnostics already starts at the beginning. So therefore, in a conventional workflow, we can only use the silicon keys. That's kind of a limitation. And then we can, or the dental technician will fabricate, for example, an implant crown. He could choose a prefabricated abutment as shown here. So this titanium-based abutment is not limited to the digital workflow. And then in a conventional workflow, the crown is fabricated by means of waxing and by the so-called lost wax technique. And at the end, the technician can add some veneering. He could also do like a monolithic crown. So monolithic design is also not limited to the digital workflow. But at the end, he puts everything together, and then he can hopefully deliver a crown to the dentist, and he can then deliver to the patient. So that's actually the conventional workflow, and you need to understand that each step is possible because there was a previous step. So it's like going from left to right, and you cannot go go back or anything. So everything is like step by step.
And it's interesting because people might think, well, Sven, this is really basic. This is dental school 101, but you already mentioned twice, this is not only possible in the digital workflow. So I think one of the aims you have tonight is that we clearly understand that some of these words that go around seem to go with digital, but actually that's just basic, the basics, right?
Yes, that's the basic. And when we look at the digital workflow, actually it's more or less the same. Because we always start with an intraoral scan, and then also the dental technician has to use computer-aided software in order to be able to design an implant model. And then he could also put these two models into a virtual articulator. Then in the digital workflow, it's much easier to copy the diagnostic work that was done at the beginning. And then he uses again, computer-aided software in order to design the crown, or also the abutment. So also the abutment could be customized, for example. But then we have to get back from the virtual world in the real world, and that's done by computer-aided manufacturing. At the end, again, we have different components, and the dental technician has to put them together. But I think the next slide is, I think, explaining how it really works. So we have three parts, actually. We have the intraoral scan, and then the dental technician designs a model. So also in the virtual world, there has to be a model designed. And then he can suddenly start with the design of the prosthesis, of the implant restoration. But the manufacturing then can be done parallel. And the manufacturing of the model and the prosthesis can be done with the same technology. Basically, for the implant model, it's mainly additive technologies. So it's printing. And for the prosthesis, it's mainly milling, so a subtractive computer-aided manufacturing. And at the end, the crown, which is manufactured, the dental technicians used to somehow double check the implant crown on the implant model. But in a digital workflow, it doesn't necessarily mean that this is really the reference, like the reference that the reference is the clinical situation. Because if we print a model with the completely wrong parameters, it's not quite good reference to check the crown before he then delivers the implant crown or the implant or any prosthesis to the dental technician. And what is important to understand is that we have a lot of parameters. So even in the computer-aided design software, there are some pre-settings, and based on the clinical situation, he needs to change these settings, but that's based on his experience. Maybe it's based on the clinical or the indication. And then also during the manufacturing of the crowns or models, we can set a lot of different parameters. For just one example, for printing models, the dental technician has to define the thickness of the printing layer. And depending on the thickness, maybe if you increase the thickness, it's faster, but maybe it's not precise enough. So that's you need to have quite an understanding of these technologies, milling or printing. And the other thing is, where is it done? So all this, the designing can be done by a dental technician, can also be done by a dentist. Then we talk about the so-called chairside workflow. The manufacturing can be outsourced to a milling company, for example. So there are different, and depending on where it's manufactured, maybe it takes more time because the crowns or the models need to be delivered. So yeah, there's a lot to understand within the digital workflow, which is quite different from the conventional. And I think that's very important, yes.
Yeah, so similar steps, but very different, and different areas where things can go wrong. That's what we should learn from this one, either in the translation from real life to virtual, from virtual back to real life, testing a virtual model on a virtual, exactly. There's new error margins or locations for errors introduced. That's what we should learn here.
Yeah, exactly. And and you need to have like the experience, and it's a learning curve. And it's not just like pressing the button and then enter, and then you have like a quite good result. That's often the companies, they tell you, well, take a scan and everything is easy, and then you don't need more than 5 minutes for the design, and the crown is perfectly fitting. So you don't need to care anymore. But I think that's not true. So you need to have you need to understand the conventional workflow. You need to understand how the digital workflow works. And then maybe you can also think of how can we establish new workflows with the help of digital technologies. So it's quite amazing what actually is possible.
Exactly. So I think in general, it's clear, we see it everywhere around us, that our world is getting more digital, reaping the benefits of digital tools and all the benefits they bring. But tonight, you would also like to underline that it's very important that you understand very well where the probable errors come from, and you're a scientist, so you actually did a lot of study work to that. Before you share some of that, Sven, let me reiterate to our audience, we are live, and I'm very curious to learn what made you click on the link, what made you save this time in your agenda and make sure you're here now with us, because that must be because you're curious. There's something you would like to know about the knowledge that Sven brings to the table. So make sure you make use of the opportunity and not only check in, like many more are doing. Christopher from Sweden, good to see you as well. Eduardo, Turker, welcome everyone. But also make use of the fact, submit your questions there, so actually we can have a lively conversation with you together. Sven, before that first question pops up, can you tell us a little bit about the studies, several studies you did, where you looked into both the efficiency and the effectiveness of these digital workflows?
Yes, exactly. So what we did for the EAO Consensus Conference, together with Ricardo Kraus, Christoph Hemmele, and Daniel Thoma, was a systematic review. And the question was, are we really more efficient or more effective when we are using digital technologies? And we searched the literature. And first, I think that's the summary. I should focus on the intraoral scanning part, because that's the part that is executed by the dentist. Later on, it's the dental technician. But at the end, we ended up with only 12 articles. That was in 2018. So even though that digital is everywhere in the world, we don't have that much of evidence for using or applying digital technologies in the dental field. And before we can take an impression, I think I would like to mention that we need a scan body in order to be able to scan or to transfer an implant. How does that work? Those scan bodies are fixed onto the implant, and later on, and that's also like a practical aspect, you need to speak to your dental technician and what kind of CAD software he has. Is the scan body, like the geometry, available in his software? Because it happened already to me that I took an intraoral scan with a scan body, and then the dental technician was calling me and said, well, unfortunately, I don't have the scan body available in my software. So I had to redo it. So we were completely lost. So this is an important aspect.
First check, yeah.
Yes, first, like you are a team with your dental technicians. You check with your dental technician what software, because it's the intraoral scan, it's the software, and there has to be kind of a calibration. And you cannot just take one scan and then another CAD software. So there has to be a kind of an understanding of what files are created, and is the CAD software able to read those files? So it sounds really basic, but it's not that basic. And then we are in the virtual world, and then we have this virtual scan body that is superimposed to this intraoral scan. And we also need to take care as dentists that we take like good scans. And as shown in this image, there could be also some kind of distortions. And if there are some irregularities, it's much more complicated or it's not precise enough, the superimposition of the virtual scan body to the scan body that was scanned.
And Sven, one quick question about that image that you're showing. Are these imperfections of the scanner or of the implant? What are we detecting here?
Well, first, it could be the scanner, but it could be also the user that did not know how to, because there's always a scan pass, and each scanner has its own scan strategy, for example. And as a user, you need to understand how your scanner works. And if you don't, then maybe you just scan, and maybe then there's a software that stitches together all these images. And if this is not done in the way that the software is kind of doing it, then you end up with, or possibly could end up with, those irregularities, which then already at the beginning you have a kind of a problem regarding the precision of the scan.
Exactly. This is a first notion of caution. This is the first area where mistakes might enter your workflow, which is done, especially if it's this early in the workflow, which will be amplified throughout every modeling and every next step you make, right?
Yeah,
Good
exactly.
point.
And going back to the systematic review, the question of this evening is what are the benefits, or what is the real advantage? And if you look at this graph, so we identified 5 articles that were like recording the impression time. And some compared with the digital scan or the intraoral scan with the conventional impression. I would like to point out Schepke. So actually, when they took a conventional impression for one single implant, and but they took full arch scans, it took them 12 minutes. And when they when they did an intraoral scan from the same clinical situation, it took them only, let's say, 6.5 minutes. Yeah. So it's statistically significant.
Yeah, you could say 50% gain in time efficiency.
Exactly, but that's not really where that you are now changing the time for the appointment for the patient, right? That's but it's like it's an advantage, and we are faster, and we are also faster. Maybe if I go back there, for example, Yoda and Brecker, in a digital workflow, we can limit the scan area to the area of interest. And the area of interest for a single implant crown is actually just, you need to scan only half of the jaw. In a conventional workflow, meaning in a conventional impression, there you need to take a complete impression of the upper and the lower. So that's actually something that you only can do with an intraoral scan, that you can limit the area of interest. And we did the same actually in our group here in Zurich. And we ended up somehow with the same numbers. So again, we could save like 5 minutes.
Exactly.
And again, statistically significant, but that's not the real benefit of this intraoral scanning. That's, at least to me, this is not where the difference is. We also looked at multi-unit implant restorations, and there we could only identify 3 studies. And there you could see from Gerlone, published in 2016, where they took impressions from a edentulous jaw with 4 implants. And again, they could save some time, but that was around 10 minutes, let's say. But there's not that much of evidence shown here. I don't see it really. And even one Wismaier, but that's an old study.
Exactly. I was going to say that's a bit of an outlier, and 7 years ago, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those digital technologies become better and better. And that's quite in science, you always need to set up the study. And then when you finish the study, the scanner is maybe already not available anymore, or it's already updated. So we are quite always like 1, 2, 3 years behind what actually we can already do. Yes. Now I cannot go.
In the meantime, let me welcome our latest viewers. Eva is joining us. Great presentation. She's already happy. But Eva, this is a just ask, so make sure, and this is not only to Eva, but to everyone joining, that you make use of our time together now, live, and reflect on what questions you have. We start to work our way through the digital workflow. We started with the intraoral scanning, and we just learned that it has scientifically significant benefits in terms of time, but as you say, in the clinic, 6 to 10 minutes, how relevant is that? Okay. What else did you study in terms of the efficiency and effectiveness of the digital workflow versus the conventional one?
Well, I would like to mention that, maybe I'm going to share it. Can you see it again?
Yes. We're with you.
So what is important is also the patient-reported outcome measures, and they become more important. And what we did is also that we were like asking the patients, what kind of impression do you prefer? And all the patients that we were asking in a study that we did were actually preferring the intraoral scan. It did not depend on which intraoral scanner, but actually if they can avoid, if they know that there is an intraoral scan, and that's happening to my patients, that when they experience once an intraoral scan, you better don't come with a conventional impression again. So this is really, and there are several studies showing that for patients, it's much more comfortable. So this is a great value and a great advantage.
Exactly.
And the other one is that Irena Seiler was showing already in her Just Ask session that actually we could already take impressions at the time of implant placement. And yes, I know that it could be also done with a conventional impression, but it's much more like hygienic to just take an intraoral scan because you don't touch the tissues. And that's a new workflow. And when we then have the digital scan, the dental technician can already start with the fabrication. And once the implant is also integrated, everything is already ready. And actually, we can save 1 appointment. And there's another case where I would like to show that the diagnostic work, which is done at the beginning, defines where to place the implant. So we use it there. We can transfer the virtual implant position with a surgical guide. That's not the question here. But then again, scan body placed. I take a scan. I don't even need to take a complete scan. I place a kind of a customized healing abutment that already has the shape of the final molar crown. And then patient appears after 3-4 months and the crown is already ready to deliver.
Exactly.
And that's something what we also wanted to study, but maybe there's a question.
Yeah, there's also a question, and I heard a nice bridge to when you touched on the surgical guides. There's a full EAO Just Ask with Andre Chen on digital technology, specifically in the surgical area and creating surgical guides. So if you're interested in that, please subscribe to the EAO channel. If you haven't done so, hit the subscribe button on YouTube right now. And make sure you check out the other EAO Just Ask. There is a question actually from Jacco. Congratulations, Jacco. You're the first one on the board making use of the fact that we're live tonight. He says, are the scan bodies radio opaque so one can check on the X-ray of it seats properly in the implant? I already see you nodding your head.
Well, it depends. I mean, there are, and the case that I showed already, just here, maybe I'm going to share it again.
Yeah, please show me.
Here I used a scan body fabricated or made out of titanium. So actually there are scan bodies that I can, when I take a radiograph, I can check the seating, the proper seating of this scan body. And that's actually an advantage. But most scan bodies are made out of PEEK material, and I agree, there we cannot take a we can take a radiograph, but we don't see if the scan body is properly seating on the implant. And that's important, because if it's not seating properly, then you can take the best scan and have the best dental technician. Your final crown will not be able to be delivered to the implant.
So what would be your advice in that case then? Would you always use a titanium or metal, or what should we do when we're not?
Well, you depend somehow on the implant company and what they provide you. And some companies, they provide you a scan body made out of a metallic material, and others don't. But in this case, for example, this scan body is not a proprietary scan body. So that's a scan body provided by a third party company. And then it gets a little bit, you need to be sure that the digital file is available and that you can still use, like the abutments that are coming from the implant company, so that you don't need to use also third-party abutments, because there we know, and we have also studies showing that they have not the same fit as the ones provided by the implant companies. So that's another where you need to check if you can really design your implant crown on an original abutment provided by the implant company.
Clear. And I think you just answered Kia's question. Kia is joining us from Dubai and writes, could we use third-body body scans that have a metal base, and would you advise it? Well, you just said, well, you could, but you need to check and double check. Want to take some more questions. Alfonso Jill, Sven, where do you see the greatest advances in the future in digital technology? So we're still here kind of covering the basis, looking back at the effectiveness and efficient study. So hold that, Sven. I still want to learn what you found in that study on effectiveness. But here's already Alfonso jumping right ahead. Where do you see the greatest advances? Is it in the scanning, in the scan bodies, in the computer-aided design, the computer-aided manufacturing?
Well, I think at the moment we have evidence, and it's limited to the posterior single implant crowns, and there it works perfectly. And I think we should increase our indications. And there, first, we don't have real evidence on these aspects, so that's where we need to create and do studies and to see how we can change the technology, or where we need to adapt. So, but yeah, that's.
So the first advances you say is to go further into into other areas in the mouth.
Yes, I mean that's what we're doing already, but we don't have the evidence.
Exactly.
But yeah.
Yeah. Speaking from a scientific background, well, EAO is all about science, so we want to do everything scientifically based. Per Otterstad is contributing also. He says it's very easy to determine a proper connection between the scan body and the implant at the time of surgery, he says. It's not a question. It's a comment to the conversation we had before, to Kia. Yeah. So he's saying no X-ray is necessary. You can just check that at the time of surgery.
Yeah, at time of surgery, I agree. But at time in the conventional way, we have the soft tissues, and maybe at the abutment connection, it's not that easy to be sure that the scan body is properly sitting on the implant. But during surgery, that's also an advantage, actually. There you can check, even with a probe, if it's sitting perfectly. I agree.
Clear. Well, the questions are really coming loose now. Congratulations to our audience. This is what this format is all about. Lucretia wants to know, are the casts made from the digital workflow usually also checked in the articulator as done in the conventional workflow?
So that's kind of a limitation she's pointing out, because this articulation part, like in a vertical articulator, yes, we can simulate the movement of the lower jaw, and that's checked virtually, and that works for single implant crowns. But as soon as we have like several restorations, what our dental technicians do is that they print a digital model, and then these digital models are mounted into a conventional articulator. So if I come back to Alfonso's questions, maybe there is an improvement so that we could integrate the jaw's movements into the virtual world, because at the moment we have the limitation, it's like static. And yes, there are some, you can simulate anything, but this is not what the patient is really doing. And we know that there are some tools where you also can record the movements, and there are also softwares that allow to import this movement, but that's not on a regular basis. But that's somehow how we could individualize or more individualize our implant restorations. I agree.
And when you say individualize, because I can imagine how you further develop the virtual model and do tests with it and simulations with it. But now you say individualize. Would I then also, as a patient, also have to kind of do a test or kind of scan the type of movement specifically for my situation?
Yes, specifically for your situation. So there are intraoral scans available where you can ask the patient to move their jaws into one direction, and then it's recorded, and this information is transferred to the design software. And there are even third-party recorders, which are a little bit more sophisticated, but all this information can be recorded and then put into the design software. That's not needed for the single implant crowns, but if it gets to more restorations, and if there are restorations in the upper and in the lower, I think that would be a great advantage in the future.
They start to become useful, and you say we're here. This is where we are crossing the line between evidence-based, scientifically studied work and things where we see the future heading. Right? That's kind of a distinction that we make all the time, I think, tonight. A question from Eric Excoffier, I think the name is. So, what is for you the best shape to be recognized by the camera? Did you see any problems with some?
Yes. So
and let me know, do you have any evidence or studies or slides with that? I see you kind of clicking, scrolling, pull it up, or otherwise just tell us from the top of your head.
I don't have signs on that, but I know there is Francesco Magnano from Italy, and he published a lot on the geometry of the scan bodies and how they influence the accuracy of the scan. And it's really difficult to I don't know by heart what was the outcome, but what I saw is that some scan bodies, they have like a round parts, and this doesn't make sense really, because if a surface is round and you would like to match a digital scan body, I think that it's not that accurate compared to scan bodies where you have like clear, sharp edges. This makes it, I think, much easier. And yes, we had some problems, especially if we have single implant crowns in the anterior, and those implants are mostly placed 4 to 6 millimeters submucosally. And then when you place the scan body on top, you even don't see the scan body anymore, because the soft tissue is covering the important aspects of the scan body that are needed to make then the virtual superimposition. And if we have like sharp edges, it's easier. If it's just round and half of the tissues or the half of the scan body is covered by the tissues, it's not possible. So
and I know every viewer in recording can just scroll back a few seconds, but those watching live who weren't quick enough to write the name down, what was the study or the paper you were referring to? Or the scientist who did the study?
The scientist, Francesco Magnano.
Exactly. So everybody can go look that up.
It's an Italian, and he has a lot of research on this, mostly in vitro.
And important for us to know now, yes, there could be an effect. And if you want to know the exact effects, go look up Francesco's paper on that. Great question, Eric. Thank you so much. Ali Murati is sending a question that is kind of multi-layered. So stay with me here, Sven. Hi, Sven. What is your opinion about scanning on the implant level versus abutment level? That's the first question mark. I'm going to read them all out, and then I think we'll cut them up. Does vertical movement after torque application up to 89 microns change the accuracy of restorations, and especially in bridges, he would like to know. So to me, as a non-dentist, that sounds as two questions.
Yes.
But you help me out here. So the first one, scanning on implant level or on abutment level? Any preference or opinion on that, or science on that, of course? We should always determine. Where are we?
So when we design a single implant crown, we scan on implant level. As soon as we have multi-unit restorations, we are advised to use multi-unit abutments. And from the conventional workflow, we are used to take conventional impressions at the abutment level. Now, we have a limitation that the implant companies, they don't provide us scan bodies that can be placed on the multi-unit abutments. And there we have to, at the moment, we have to rely on third-party providers again. But that's a wish out into the world, or to the implant manufacturer, that they provide us scan bodies to take impressions at implant level, and scan bodies that allow us to take impressions at abutment level, as we do in the conventional workflow.
Exactly. So hopefully some people from industry are watching, or if you know someone from industry, please share this video with them. This video will be available on the EAO channel for a long time, so anybody can watch that as well. And how about that, the second question about whether vertical movement after torque application changes the accuracy of the restorations, specifically in bridges? Sounds like a question for the conversation I had with Stefano Grassis.
Yeah, but I can't really answer that question, because when we have multi-unit restorations, I always check the passive fit. And normally you fix one screw in one crown, and then you fix the other screw in the second crown, and then you go back to the first one and you check if you can retighten it. If not, it's sitting perfect. If yes, the multi-unit restoration is not fitting passively, and then you have to actually redo it. But that's
exactly. And I think we talked a lot about this, as I said, in the Just Ask with Stefano Grassi. So Ali, maybe you want to, after this one, go look that one up as well. It's all for free on the EAO channel. And obviously the EAO, the European Association of Osseointegration, would love it if you also consider membership, because there's so much more online content available in the EAO online library, in the educational programs that the EAO offers. So let me just give you a reminder of that. Ali says, thanks a lot. So your answer is clear to him. In the meantime, Mauricio Gerhardt is contributing to the conversation by posting Francesco's Mangano's name for full, so everybody can go look that up and Google that paper. Thank you, Mauricio. And then Eric is back, Eric Escoffier, with a question. He says, for scanning on all on 4 cases, I put small rubber bands between the scan bodies. And he's wondering, do you do the same? Do you recognize this kind of approach?
I mean, with an edentulous jaw, it's always difficult, or could be difficult, for intraoral scanners, because there are not much reference structures as we have in partially edentulous patients, where the reference structures are the teeth, actually. And if anything helps, that can be placed on the soft tissues, where the intraoral scanner has like a kind of a reference for the superimpositioning of the different pictures that it's taking. It's always easier in the upper, because there we have the more tissues which is stable, and in the lower it's quite difficult. And maybe instead of using a rubber dam, I would recommend to use some kind of powder that we were used to use when we had intraoral scanners that only worked when we added some powder on top of the teeth. So
why is that, Sven?
just to give a kind of a reflection, so like a structure to the surface that the scanner can easily detect the structure. So and that's, I think, what is the reason.
What Eric is doing.
Yes.
Yeah. Wim Slot from Groningen in the Netherlands also contributes with a question. He says, what is your opinion, or like on EAO we always says, what do you know about science regarding using healing abutments as scan bodies? Is that a good idea or a bad idea? Or what do we know about that?
First, the implant provider has to have this option. So you depend on what is possible. And I know that there is an implant company where you can scan the healing abutment, because the healing abutment has kind of a coding on top. But personally, I don't have any experience, and I don't know anything about any scientific data on this topic, to be honest. Maybe there is, but I don't know really.
Exactly. So it's purely a matter of availability, also whether that is possible.
Yeah.
Wim, if you have any additional information on that, please feel free to share that in the chat as well. So that is the kind of the backlog of questions we have. Congratulations to our audience, who's also really now ramping up. Sven, if we enter this moment of a quick pause between the questions, could you share a little bit more? As I said, your study was really on the efficiency of the digital workflow. We looked into that a little bit, only on the intraoral scanning yet, but also on the effectiveness of the digital workflow. And that particularly interests me, because that it's more efficient to work digital, yes or no, and how much, that's interesting. But what does it mean to the outcomes or to other parts of the workflow? What did you research there?
So I'm going to share my screen again, and then how can you assess effectiveness first?
Exactly.
That's the question.
How did you?
So again, I'm going back to the systematic review, and there are two options. Either you can record the time for the delivery of the implant restorations, or you can also record the amount of adjustments that you have to do in order to deliver the crown. And what we saw is, and these are only 4 studies actually, and there we have the numbers, that if we have a monolithic crown coming from a digital workflow, if we have a prefabricated abutment, we need less time or less chairside time to deliver the crown. Any time that the dental technician somehow individualized the abutment or added some veneering, it took more time, the dentist, to adjust it, maybe to reduce the occlusal contact areas or maybe the proximal contact areas. So that's one aspect, actually. So we are faster when we use a prefabricated abutment and when we choose a monolithic design. But again, and that was I was saying at the beginning, this is not specific to the digital workflow. But in this case, or in these studies, those were fabricated or by means of a digital workflow. And there is another, there are 4 other studies. Again, PFM, so the conventional implant crown, actually they saw that in each of these conventional implant crowns, they needed to do anything. So as I said, to adjust the crowns. For the veneered zirconia crowns, it was a little bit less, so only 40%. And I'm talking about the hybrid workflow. So it's not, most often it's not only a digital workflow, but there are some parts that are also manufactured conventionally. So that's, as soon as we combine those workflows, we talk about a hybrid workflow. And the other thing is that we could see, even when we did not have a model, so these monolithic implant crowns were fabricated without an implant model, none of this 56, so the evidence is not that great, let's say. 56 implant crowns, that's not a lot, but none of these implant crowns needed any adjustments in order to be delivered. But you need to know that it's a calibrated, highly calibrated workflow, that the manufacturing of these implant crowns was outsourced. So it was not done in the dental lab, It was done by the implant manufacturer, and therefore you achieve like a high industrial quality, and that's somehow explaining these good outcomes. In my personal experience, sometimes, as in a conventional workflow, I need to adjust those crowns. And this, the last one, I don't want to go into detail because the fabrication process was not really specified, so we can't say anything really about what was now the reason why we need to adjust it. But as shown here, in 3 out of 36 crowns, for example, also they could be placed. So that's, I don't see it really here. Yeah, could not be placed without the gingivectomy. So maybe there's also soft tissue that prevents the implant crowns to be properly seated.
So, Sven, based on these relatively limited amount of studies, but as we see 2015, so it's also a while back, your conclusion would be that the monolithic digital single crown implants are more effective?
Yes.
Careful conclusion? Yeah.
Careful conclusion with the limitations that I was just mentioning. But actually, it tells us that implant crowns can be manufactured in a so-called chairside workflow, because digital technologies allow us to follow a chairside workflow, meaning that we take a scan and the dentist is designing the implant crown, then he has a kind of a milling machine in his office or in her office, and then it's ready in, let's say, half an hour. And without having an implant model, the crown can be delivered. There's one important aspect. For the chairside workflow, we have these titanium-based abutments. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, we have a monolithic ceramic crown, because that's the material that can be processed with computer-aided manufacturing. So they have to be fixed or glued or adhesively bonded to each other. And that's mostly done outside the mouth, which is much easier. But in my experience, if you put the crown to the titanium base, there's it's not a clear positioning possible, mostly. And therefore, I doubt if this is really working good. Some people, they place the titanium base onto the implant. They cement the implant crown intraorally, because then they know the exact positioning of the implant crown. As soon as the cement is set, they're going to unscrew the implant crown and then finish the implant crown manually, and then place it again. So in my world, I like to rely on an implant model. Yes, that's.
Yeah, you would want to rely on an implant model, right?
Yes, yes.
Next topic that we also promised. No, before we move on, let's clearly sum up, because we promised we talked about the advantages and the disadvantages of the digital workflow. Have we heard enough to kind of conclude? Also, kind of the cautions of tonight. What are some of the disadvantages that our audience should be aware of?
I mean, I would like to say the biggest advantage that we did not talk about is the time efficiency or the time gain during the fabrication process. So for the dental technician, so it's much faster. The working time is significantly reduced, and it's not about minutes, it's about hours. So there's a great advantage. Also,
so where we started with the scanning and you said, well, it's just minutes, is it really clinically relevant? But in the fabrication process, that's where you gain all the time.
Yes, yeah. Of course, as a dental technician, you have to invest in these technologies, but at the same time, you can manufacture much more of these implant units. That's you have to decide as a dental technician what is the best way to go. That's the biggest advantage that we did not touch until now, but I didn't want to miss this. And then you had also a second question.
Yeah, so, and on the contrast, what are some of the disadvantages, or not disadvantages, but cautions that you want to bring across tonight that people should be aware of? We started very much with the basics. We said, first of all, people need to understand the conventional workflow, see how it's digitized, and understand how the steps interact. What cautions do we need to walk away with tonight?
I think most important, we need to understand that there are some two interfaces, and these interfaces need to be calibrated, and you cannot do this alone, and this has to be done in the team with your dental technician. I think that's most important. And some companies, they provide you a so-called closed workflow where they take responsibility that it works. As soon as if you start to put different scanners and softwares and millimachines together, it's up to you as a team to calibrate this work. And that takes time. It will never work from the beginning. And it's a learning curve. And we rely on digital technologies, but we also rely on this, that sometimes there's an update, and we even don't realize that there is an update, and suddenly the implant crowns don't fit anymore, and no one knows why. So you have to be careful that you don't install an update and you don't know what happens. For example, that all the settings are set back to the pre-settings, and all these individualized settings are lost. So this is something you need to be careful about.
Exactly. So here's a caution. This is funny because it kind of ties in into a question that Ali Murati is also submitting. Let me start with the comment of why he asked. He says, I'm asking this because even the slightest software update can create different results, and papers always reveal outdated software. Because his real question was, when it comes to the speed of technology, evidence cannot catch up clinical experience. He reflects to us trying to really base ourselves on clinical papers tonight, which are, well, your review is from 2018, which is 3 years ago. In the world of digital technology is ages, right? So he says, what is your opinion about real-time data coming from intraoral scanning users and the use of AI for interpretation of the data? Let's again make a cut between those two parts of the question. So how about the real-time visualization of the intraoral scanners? Do you see that coming soon? Is that workable? Is that feasible? And how should that be applied?
So the real-time visualization is already there. So as soon as we take the scan, we have it on the screen. And that's actually a great tool for me as a dentist that can be used for the communication with the patient. So that's a great advantage. And it's not only about taking scans from implants. I use this scanner also as a tool to have a discussion with a patient, because I can enlarge some clinical situations, discuss where the inflammation is. So that's a great advantage, I think.
How about the next step? Having artificial intelligence helping you to immediately, I don't know what, diagnostics, real-time design, design suggestions. What do you know of things happening in that field?
It's happening a lot, I would say. And I think we already rely on artificial intelligence. Even if we take scans, there's a software behind. And this software somehow realizes on how you're taking the scan and adapts the calculation. And then there are, for example, you could easily, in the softwares that you always get like a kind of a first virtual setup of the crown. And this is based, there are some companies saying that this first draw is based on the anatomical contours of the neighboring teeth. So it's somehow interpreting the data of the anatomy, and then the proposition is like should somehow reflect like the neighboring contours. So there's also a lot when we not maybe in fixed restorations on teeth where you have to define the crown margin. That's done automatically, but we need to understand that we need to distinguish between automatization and the artificial intelligence.
Exactly.
And that's always difficult, and to see what's happening in the softwares, really, to be honest. And they even won't tell you really, but I think there's going a lot, and maybe we will get some kind of treatment plannings, propositions based
Exactly,
on how
kind of a
much.
proposal
Yeah.
immediately when you make the scan. This is probably your best solution based on all the designs and scans I have in my database, and I've kind of generated the optimal solution. That could be where it's going. And then his third part of his question, which is almost science philosophy. Why is it important, or what type of science do we need to back this up? Like you did a study comparing the both workflows to kind of determine efficiency, effectiveness. Then Ali says, well, science is always walking a few years behind. It's in the clinic where we gain this experience, and we should move ahead. What is your view on that?
Yeah, that's science. I mean, we are always a little bit behind, but I think we should not stop to create science also on this topic, on digital technologies, because otherwise we only rely on the opinion of experts or on the opinion of the implant companies or any company. And just I would like to answer the second question about the artificial intelligence in orthodontics. We already have some tools. There's a big company, an aligner company, where you take an intraoral scan and then you get suddenly like a solution on how you can properly align your teeth. And this proposition is based on artificial intelligence, based on big data and on like millions of cases that were treated. So there we see already what is possible. And it's already here. And maybe it's also soon in implant prosthodontics.
Exactly. Sounds exciting. Yeah, very exciting. Exactly. Mauricio, again, is also contributing. He says, it is a matter of time. AI will play a role in both the assessment, diagnostics, and planning. And the key advantage, it's time-saving and avoids operator variability, he says. Well, we learned tonight new variabilities are introduced, but at least the operator is cut out. Alberto Sogada says it's very interesting and quite so many doubts solved already. Now, Alberto, I'd love to know what kind of doubts you got solved. But I want to take to a question from Per Otterstad. He says, back to the scan bodies. He says, is reusing a peak scan abutment safe with respect to any wear of the peak material? Any knowledge, experience, or views on that?
No evidence on that topic. Of course, if you damage the surface by placing the scan body, then you need to exchange the scan body. In our clinic, we are also reusing the scan bodies, but I always check carefully if the scan body, the surface is not damaged because of the manipulation while placing the scan body or when removing. So just check the surface of the scan body before you take the scan.
So you say in general, Per, yes, it's safe as long as you've kind of visually checked it that there's no modifications visually there. Yes. Great answer, thanks. We move into our last kind of block that we have available with our time tonight. One of the things on the agenda in our promotion was to talk a bit about the model-free workflow. Shall we dive a bit into that, Sven? What is it? What do we need to know?
Well, we touched it already a little bit, the model-free workflow, because in a chairside workflow, actually, we follow a model-free workflow. And we had one study that we did together with Xiao Xiapan from Beijing, where we were following, where we took, and I don't have the slides to this study, but I can explain it easily, where we had 40 implant crowns fabricated with a model-free workflow, and 40 implant crowns were fabricated with the help of an implant model where the dental technician could recheck the fit of the implant crown. And in both, 1 out of 8 implant crowns could not be delivered. So it was actually the same outcome for both workflows. Again, saying that we don't really need the implant model. So it has to, this 1 out of 8 crowns had to be resent to the dental technician. So we could not adjust the implant crown in order to be able to deliver it, because there was a missing contact point in the proximal area. So that was the result based on this study.
So no major difference in that study. Would you say then in future we're just a matter of time away that we will get rid of the implant models, or what is your expectation on that?
For the single implant crowns in the posterior, yes, but not for the anterior, because in the anterior we would like to add some veneering, maybe to get like a high aesthetic outcome. And there, by just adding some manual veneering layer, you need to have a model. And as soon as you have two restorations next to each other or in two different quadrants, whatever, you also need to have a model. So I think it's really limited to the single implant crowns in the posterior.
At the moment?
At the moment.
Or in general?
At the moment.
At the moment. And we are recording this in June 2021. We should coin that as well. Everybody can see that. Question from Lawrence Blackie Swart from South Africa, who's joining regularly on these Just Ask. Good evening, Lawrence. He says, do you also find, it's not really a question, kind of a confirmation of his opinion, do you also find that some human interference, obviously with the best intent, he says, in the digital workflow design can be disastrous to the end result? Great care and attention to detail. So you reference, for example, a few times the word hybrid. You don't mean then a human interfering with digital, but where do you see this human-digital interaction? And is it indeed potentially a risk, like Lawrence points out?
Of course. I mean, anytime that a human touches anything, there's a risk. So that's
exactly. We're also afraid of robots, right? But at least the robots aren't hungover.
Yeah. Exactly. No, of course. I mean, we have to, anytime we need to understand the technology, we have to learn, and we could also potentially add some errors because we don't understand how it works. So yes, we have to be careful on it.
Yeah, so that's a general note of caution. You already said, especially on the single crown implants in the posterior, this is model-free workflow, maybe real-time, a lot of potential. But what if we enter the more complex cases, Sven? Where are we there, and what are some of the key limitations or things we run into once we go to multiple implant or perhaps fully edentulous?
So there, even, for example, implant companies, they ask for a conventional implant model in order to fabricate, for example, a titanium bar. And that's actually the workflow that is that a lot of people or dentists are doing, that they take conventional impressions. And as soon as the dental technician has casted the implant model or any model, then the model is digitalized in the lab with a dental lab scanner. So it's actually, as a dentist, you do not really need to have an intraoral scanner, and still you can work or you can ask for a digital workflow for the fabrication process. So, and that's happening. Of course, we are working in the university and we try everything, and we also spend more time. And we also go back and take another scan, and we try to go digital with any case, even complex cases. And we learn a lot. And for sure, we will rely on the intraoral scans and on this computer-aided design softwares, even in complex cases. But you have to spend time, and that's it's based on what kind of patients you have, what you do most in your private practice, and based on that, you are going to see what's possible.
Clear. Well, you said it already. I work in the university. We try everything. In these last 10 minutes we have tonight, let me first of all, if you're still sitting on a burning question, this is time to enter it. Otherwise, you miss the opportunity. Sven, I want to ask you, if you look forward, if you look at some of the work you're working on right now, what are some of the things, exciting things that we can expect in the near to far future? We touched on some of the topics already throughout the session tonight, but what are some of the specifics that you are working on?
Well, one really exciting technology is printing, additive computer-aided manufacturing. And I'm not I'm part of a study group. Actually, it's Alexis Ioannidis, also an assistant professor in our department, that is doing a lot of research on how to print zirconia. And that's really great. And he has published in vitro studies on that topic, just to show first that a printed zirconia restoration is as stable or has the same mechanical properties as one milled. And he could prove that. Second, that the fit of this printed zirconia restoration has the same fit as milled zirconia restorations, and that is also true. So there I see it's coming, this printing. It's not there, but it's possible to print zirconia. How can we apply that in implant prosthodontics? Maybe, well, because we have like a prefabricated, always a base, which is like the same for each case. There we can still rely on milling zirconia, for example. But when it comes to fixed restoration on teeth, where we have for each tooth an individual shape, there I see a great advantage. And also when we mill zirconia, and we always need to choose a colored block, and maybe we have some multi-layers, and then we mill the crown in a full anatomic contour. But at the end, and that's a study that we did with a monolithic crown, we cannot have the same aesthetic outcome. And maybe because these monolithic zirconias, they're just like added some coloring liquid on top. But when you have veneering, you can really end up with high aesthetic results. But when we do it by printing and we tell the printer which layer has to have which color, that would be a great advantage, because then we don't have to rely on a dental technician and his manual skills. And today we are even able to take intraoral scans with, let's say, realistic colors. And this information, we have it already. And if we can transfer this information into the software and then into the computer-aided manufacturing, then because that's then we have like a perfect outcome also regarding the color match to the neighboring teeth.
So that's exciting work in your lab right now. You say the strength is there, the fit is there. At first, not sure if it's really applicable to the implant world, since it's always on a standardized foundation. So why would you go printing? What can you say? Well, obviously it's still experimental technology, but what can you say in terms of time efficiency? We talked about it a lot tonight. Is the milling versus the printing, is it much slower to print or faster or same time? Or
depends on the technology that you're using. So, and printing actually is quite a complex technology, because you just, again, you need, when you have a 3D object, you need to place this 3D object, or it's called nesting. Before you print, you need to virtually nest the object. And you need to understand the technology, because for implant models, for example, you can print them like vertically, or you can place the object in a 45-degree. And then there are studies showing that if you print using this specific technology with a 45-degree, the precision actually is better. So, so you need to understand how to nest the object, and then once the object is printed, I mean, you also need to put some structures in order to hold the object during the fabrication process. And once it's printed, you need to remove those supporting structures, which again takes time. And it's the same for the milled objects. There you also have the supporting structures, but depending on which kind of additive technology you're using, maybe you spend more time. And with these models, maybe you need also to post-cure those models. And then we have some evidence that maybe the three-dimensional stability of this printed object is not staying as in the same way as after printing. So there's a change over time. For example, if you wait 6 to 8 weeks, then maybe there's a kind of a shrinkage.
Is this for 3D printing in general, or specifically for 3D printing zirconia?
No, this is specific for 3D printing.
In general.
PMMA. So
Exactly.
like for, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
all right. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but you also hinted at a very cool application, and that is in terms of coloring, that we could actually do a real-time matching. Yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Let me acknowledge also, Kia, I see your questions, but you're hinting to have our expert comment on specific brands or specific equipment or software, and that's why I'm not taking that question, because in this podium we cannot do that. So thank you for submitting and being part of that, but that's why I'm not reading out your questions to Sven at the moment. Sven, we're nearing the end of this very exciting Just Ask on the real advantages of the digital technologies in implant prosthodontics. If you could underline one key takeaway for tonight, what do you hope our audience walks away with?
First, that they understood that there's a learning curve, that you need to work in a team with a dental technician, because actually he or she is doing the fabrication, and there needs to be a calibration. But I think when you spend enough time, and if you are also like really eager to learn something, if you want to implement those digital technologies, it's kind of a hobby. It should be a kind of a hobby, because you need to spend more time. I mean, if you could easily do it with a conventional workflow, that works. But I think there are great advantages also regarding or for the patient, and that's why we do it. But that's I think most important: calibration, learning curve, and
exactly.
Yeah.
And it sounds like we're in a bit of a transition phase, right? Where we're in between. Scientific evidence is limited, yet developments are going really, really fast, and there's a lot of exciting stuff to come. Thank you so much, Sven. Sven Mühlemann, live with us from Zurich in Switzerland, talking to us about the real advantages. Thank you for joining tonight, Sven.
Thank you, Gerrit, and thank you.
And thank you all for being such an active audience. If you really like this, there's a few things I'd like to send you off with. First of all, if you haven't done so, make sure you hit the subscribe button on the EAO channel, because we have a monthly session like this every first Monday of the month, where we have an expert from the field of implant dentistry, and you can answer any questions. Or if you missed it, you can watch the recording for free. And throughout the EAO channel, you find many, many more educational videos for you to be there for free. Now, secondly, if you know someone who might find this topic of this specific video of interest, make sure you like the link in the networks that you have. Send them around in your organizations, in your institutions. And make sure you save the date. If you're scientifically involved in the field of implant dentistry, make sure you now mark August the 1st very clearly in your agenda, because that's the deadline for the abstract submission for the second edition of the EAO Digital Days. And if you just want to reap the benefits of that education, make sure you hit your agenda for the month of October. At October 8th, the EAO Digital Days platform will open. On the nights of October the 12th to the 14th, we have these very nice live interactive broadcast shows. And then the rest of the month, the platform is still available. And throughout the year, if you're not yet a member of the EAO, please consider signing up as a member, because you get full access to the EAO online library, to all the educational offerings and all the entire benefits of the EAO. So if you're part of this, you might as well be part of that. One more time, thank you all for being with us. Thank you, Sven, and hope to see you back next time, first Monday of the month, which is next month, July the 5th.